Section 8.2 covers two parts. This is really the part that starts to get us into what is photosynthesis. There's another part that you're going to be focusing on in class. It's going to kind of give you the background information about how photosynthesis was discovered. Photosynthesis is a process in which plants use energy of sunlight to convert water and carbon dioxide into high energy carbohydrates, and oxygen is basically a waste product. It's going to create sugars and starches, glucose, and what we talked about in one of the earlier sections for 8.1 is this storing of energy and good energy, things to store energy in for the plant. And these sugars, starches, glucose are going to provide us with some of that and also provide us with some energy as well. Let's look at the actual equation for photosynthesis. And there's lots of other reactions involved with photosynthesis, so this is kind of a simplified version that we're going to focus on for the purpose of this class. So in here, again, remembering we have our reactants and then our products. So what needs to go into photosynthesis? We have carbon dioxide, water, and the one that's not on here but we do need is sunlight. Lots of times you might see it as HV. So if you see this written down, it means energy from the sunlight. You might also see just, plus sunlight. But just knowing if we talk about photosynthesis, while we need carbon dioxide and water, there is this sunlight component as well. And those are going to yield C6H12O6, which is glucose, and oxygen. So we talked about in the previous slide, energy from sunlight is needed. And this sunlight will provide us with the energy for the reaction to take place. Thinking back to the different types of reaction and activation energy and whatnot, in order for this reaction to occur, we need some energy source. And the amount of energy that is absorbed will depend on the wavelength of that light. And light is used from the visible spectrum. So in the next slide, we're going to kind of talk about, okay, well, what do you mean the amount of energy and wavelength and whatnot? So let's look at the sunlight coming into the plant and how the plant is using that and what it's getting from it. Alright, so this what we have here is called the electromagnetic spectrum, and it shows all different forms of light. And in this kind of little section right in here is where the visible light is. And we have our nanometers down here, which has to do with the wavelength. Let's focus on wavelength. So if we noticed over here, there's longer wavelength, these are shorter wavelengths. So in looking at the visible spectrum, which wavelengths are the longest? They're going to be kind of these right in here. The yellow, the orange, the red, and those that are going to be the shortest are our kind of purples, blues, that type of thing. And when we look at how does that relate to energy, well, wavelength and energy are inversely related. So as wavelength increase, I'm just going to abbreviate by wavelength, then there's going to be a decrease in energy. So those that are going to have the most energy are going to be the shortest. So you're going to have more energy on this side. and thus less on this side. We know from previous discussions that the plants are going to absorb sunlight, and that's where they're getting their energy. Sunlight is absorbed by the chloroplasts in the plant cells. And because they're absorbing light, light is a wavelength, it also has energy, and by absorbing a specific wavelength that we talked about before, it's also absorbing energy and provides the cells with energy that they're going to need to complete photosynthesis. There are some pigments that are better for absorbing certain wavelengths of light than others, and it really depends on each individual pigment. So when we look at chlorophyll, chlorophyll is the main pigment in plant cells. It is going to absorb red and blue wavelengths, which in turn it's going to reflect the green pigments. And this is why plants are green in color. When a plant is absorbing it, it's taking in all of that color. Basically, you can't see it. So anything that it's not taking in, it's going to transmit, it's going to reflect, and that's why plants are going to appear green. So there's a specific wavelength and therefore energy that is associated with those red and blue wavelengths. So you can go back to that slide, take a look at the wavelengths that are associated with that, but knowing there's some different energy amounts that we're going to get for that. There are a couple other pigments listed below here, and again, those are going to focus on specific wavelengths that they're going to absorb and therefore transmit. So this gives us this little idea that by absorbing sunlight, they're absorbing these wavelengths because light can be either a wave or a particle, and our wavelength is going to allow us for these different colors, and the particle is going to have that energy component. This is just a quick little image of the process of photosynthesis. Again, you have light energy that is coming from the sun, and then you have carbon dioxide coming through the stomata. Stomata we really didn't talk too much, but opening in the cell wall, and they're going to go to these chloroplasts, which are going to help trap the light energy. You have water entering, and you have this reaction going on right here to provide with sugar and oxygen for the cell.